This is Captain Jack here, and we're ranking every single Billy Joel song out of 10. Just a few helpful bits before I get into it. I have an unlisted video in the description that has a music sample for every single song featured here, so you can click on that and run it alongside this video to hear the song while I'm talking about it. You'll see a notification on the top right side of the screen for when to start playing that video. This was done to hopefully prevent this video from being taken down because, well, it would have had over 120 pieces of copyrighted music in it. You can also listen to the background music of your choice or just hear my commentary without any backing track. Speaking of commentary, obviously all rankings are just opinions of my own, and if you disagree, let me know in the comments below. One last helpful piece of information. If you see an album cover in the bottom left section of the screen, this is an alternate version of the song that I thought was worth mentioning. There will be a brief comment to the right that will give some of the differences in this version, along with a rating. Much better, meaning it's probably the preferred version of the song. Moderately better, meaning it's slightly above the original. And worth looking at, meaning it's not noticeably better, but worth checking out for curiosity's sake. If it has this album cover, that means it's from Songs in the Attic, a live album from 1980 that featured some of his forgotten songs from his earlier years. If it has this album cover, that means it's from My Lives, which was a compilation album released in 2005 that featured demos and alternate versions of his songs spanning over his entire career. If, on the rare occasion, it isn't either of these albums, then the album cover will be explained in the comment. All songs and alternate versions can be found right here on YouTube. That's it. Enjoy the list. The worst of the instrumentals, which is another way of saying the worst of the worst. It makes me wonder if there's an alternate universe out there where Joel is stuck making elevator music like this for the rest of his life. The instrumentation in this happy-go-lucky little thing is extremely dated, which makes it even worse. This song is begging to be brought out and shot. Reggae and Joel go together like oil and water. A Blight, unarguably his best album. Extremely generic pop song that's worse sin is just how forgettable it is. It's a duet with Cyndi Lauper, but you should probably just go ahead and memory hole that too. One of his earliest narrative songs. With lyrics like Misty Satin Dreams and Wooded Glades, it really makes you wonder what he was on when he wrote this one. A ragtime instrumental that's an odd little bland piece of work. Not much to say here. An artsy long piece that I don't really know how to describe. It's definitely inspired by Beatle acid trip songs like I Am the Walrus. It doesn't feel right that Joel's singing it though. More importantly, it's not fun to listen to. There's nothing in this one really. It's just overproduced noise. It's a power ballad that feels like it could be something if it really wanted to, but it just decided to suck. One of the few early rock songs from Joel. It's very unoriginal, and the subject matter is so simple you can get more than the gist of it from the title alone. Why Judy Why was this song ever made? An extremely sappy love ballad, but I don't have the heart to give it the 1 out of 10 it deserves. A very simple rock song that has the quality of something you'd hear at a dingy county fair. You can't get much cheesier than beer being pronounced beer. An interesting beat, an eccentric synth motif, and decent lyrics are all here, but why does it feel flat? It just feels decayed and weak, like something you would hear from a band at a retirement home. Nothing sticks here. It feels like an unfinished outtake. It has a herky-jerky sort of beat that feels really awkward. Its theme is about the past, but it doesn't do it as masterfully as anything off Innocent Man. For someone who often has his finger to the pulse of the middle class, this sounds really distant and fake. The lyrics are so heavy-handed and stupid that it wouldn't be out of place as a country top 40 today. It's really cool how a song about optimistic ideals becoming murky and uncertain with age has instrumentation that also is murky and uncertain. Oh wait, that's not cool. That's hard to listen to. Sounds very strained and honestly like it was written for someone else. The message is very wishy-washy and vague. But, I mean, look on the bright side. It has a Christmas theme so you can avoid it all other days of the year. Sounds like a coda to something that was never written. Shares its namesake with the album it was featured on, so why wasn't it well known? Well, because it sucks. It carries the country motif of the Piano Man album decently, but it's just missing something. Also, the message is decidingly of his generation, with it being pro-no-fault divorce. What? Joel's first dive into the country genre, and it's definitely his first dive into the country genre. Country was never a strong suit for him. Sounds like the theme song to an old cop show, and at the same time we hear an accordion. If you think that sounds bad, that's because it is. It sounds like a Beatles outtake. It has good energy, but is generally unpolished. It's the best 3 out of 10 ever made. It's just, I don't think I could pick out one thing that stands out as being bad, it's just all bad. A jazzy little bit at the end of the album that sounds like filler. Feels like the album name was decided then the song was created instead of the other way around like normal, and frankly it shows. The best two-word visual description for this song would be sneaky blues, but it's a bit too lethargic for its own good. Feels like a shrug that fills up the first side of the album. You got an Elton John-esque fusion of gospel rock and country here, but it sounds just a tad bit inauthentic. A great jazzy number, but the overreaching, almost screaming quality of Joel's voice here kills a lot of potential. You know, it's not a completely bad melody, but ultimately a failed experiment, with 2 out of the 3 verses being in French. Apparently the French was so botched that when he sang it in France, the audience thought he was singing in Polish. The instrumentation here is tired, phony, hasn't aged well. The lyrics, however, paint a pretty good picture of suburban life that you can get into a bit. Unspectacular, but I imagine it wasn't reaching for too much in the first place. It's a nice warm bit of soul for what it is. The backing vocals are a little silly, but it's as good as far as covers go. A poignant ballad that slogs just a bit too much. It would probably just be better with the piano and vocals. So cheesy, it's too cheesy. This almost Huey Lewis sounding fluff was one of the 2 songs Joel wrote for movies, and it's the lesser of those 2 even. Although extremely dated lyrically, the line, "maybe she's the quiet type who's into heavy metal," is really weird, but yet I think still relevant today, so I guess there's a bonus point for that one. The instrumental that is by far his least obnoxious. Decent, although it doesn't stand out. Though I have found it makes good study music. Hectic synths fuel this album starter, but it doesn't go anywhere interesting. Joel has said that it was meant to sound like a Police song, and it does, but not one that would ever make the album cut. This started Stormfront and was probably a good way to introduce his fans to his new sound thanks to a different producer. It's a nice little blues rock piece, but the words are where it really loses me. The topic today is, people tell lies about my supermodel wife. And that's really hard to relate to. This right here is a perfect example as to why people thought Joel was playing catch-up with current trends at this time in his career. This is a forgettable ballad that could have been written by anyone. There's nothing wrong with it. He's singing about his daughter, so that's a nice touch. But yeah, meh. An interesting concept. Basically what it says on the tin, a prayer about a loved one traveling home. I love the energy, but the fake ending and the jaw harp, yeah, they're a bit much. I'm a bit of a hypocrite on this one. Yeah, it has no structure musically or lyrically, but I've memorized almost all the words, even though it sucks. It's a song you sing in the car with your friends. There's room in the world for those. A slower ordeal that's an interesting allegory, but it's also quite depressing as it describes life as more like a play than a musical. It's got the melody of Allentown buried in at the end as a way of tying those 2 themes together, but overall, I don't think it could exist outside the end of an album. I like the soul-inspired backing vocals, but it's just too campy to be likable. It sounds like it was designed to be a top 40 hit, but you can't really aim for that out of the gate and expect good results. A retro rocker that feels a bit flat, but it's bursting with energy. The demo version that you can sometimes find online is a bit better, and that's the one I recommend. One of those I can't put into words how much I love you type of songs. Actually a pretty decent love ballad, but considering Joel has tons of better ones, it fades into obscurity pretty quick. A functional rocker with some good energy. The biting lyrics are both funny and quite era-specific, so somewhat unrelatable. Originally for a compilation album of kids' songs made by big songwriters during that time, and it's much better than you would imagine considering that. It's got a goofy, fun energy unrivaled by any of his other songs, and it's too cute to hate. A mature Joel watches his suburb get gentrified and feels at least partially responsible for not doing anything. This album is often slammed for being old dad rock, and this song is definitely guilty of that. But lines like, "Give us this day, our daily discount outlet merchandise," shows Joel's cynical, snappy wit at its best. A song about Joel falling in love with a prostitute, but it's surprisingly delicate considering that. One of those songs in the I Hate LA saga. Pretty decent rocker, but it just doesn't have that pop that would make it reach the next level. This one's got a unique subject, being about how bad habits will make you pay consequences. Not wide in scope, but it does what it sets out to do. Nothing too stimulating here, but the bass line is easily the best, grooviest thing in the song. The metaphor here is about impending crisis characterized as a storm, which I guess works okay. What even is this? It's one of the strangest in the catalog, with its constantly changing major-minor descending chord progression. Although I'm sure the song is technically brilliant, the end product is a slow burner that took a bit to warm up to me. One, if not the most depressing song he ever wrote. The weakest song on Innocent Man, but being the worst on one of the better albums is still something to be proud of. A nice little cheesy Motown song that you'd have to listen to as a teenager to truly get. Realistically, the instrument count here could be cut in half because it's so overcomplicated, but the violin is a fun, rare experience. He had a falling out with his manager at this time, and although you can definitely hear the vitriol in his words, it's just a bit too clunky to be really lovable. Ultimately more of a curiosity than anything. Sounds dated today with its big synth and echoed vocals. But it marks a good transition point from the carefree innocent man Joel to the older one that we see with a family from this point on. A very sleepy ordeal with floaty, impressionistic lyrics. Nevertheless, a good soft ending to Glass Houses that I can't bring myself to hate. A nice Bob Dylan cover that he puts a lot of, albeit dated sounding, soul into. He does the song justice, but it's hard to argue why you wouldn't just listen to the Adele version. A tad bit undercooked, but it's hard not to get swept up in its sentiments about mankind, which are well-meaning. It's We Didn't Start the Fire's mature older brother. A country love ballad that works well in its simplicity. An acoustic guitar is the main instrument here, which is unexpected. Bump it up a point if you can get over the fact that Instant Pleasure Dome is one of the lyrics. One of the jazziest songs Joel has ever recorded. It seems to be a favorite of his as he plays it often in concerts recently. It's long and wanders a bit too much, but the trumpet solo is excellent. The grandiose big production is actually quite appropriate here, but I can't exactly point to why. It's booming, it's strong, and it's just generally a good time. Released in 2007, making it the very last of the last Joel has ever wrote. It's a slow Sinatra-style jazz piece that doesn't sound half bad. His 50-year-old voice certainly fits it. A piano duet with Ray Charles that has a very sweet sentiment to it. It almost reaches New York State of Mind quality, but even a second-rate version of that song is still a great song. Most likely the only deep cut on the bridge that's worth resurrecting. Extremely bleak and absolutely wrought with depression, Captain Jack captures the feeling of urban hopelessness very well. A pretty established song in his library that I dare say is overrated. Was originally the theme to a movie with the same name starring Rodney Dangerfield, and as a result, feels a little bit different than the other songs on Innocent Man. There isn't really anything interesting going on here, but what Easy Money lacks in substance, it makes up in energy and style. Really unique topic about the over-commercialization of Elvis after his death, all while using lyrics from his best songs while giving them a different meaning. It's nothing special, but it's a nice tribute, and it makes you wonder why it wasn't included on Nylon Curtain, because it was around the same time, and it's a lot better than most of the stuff on that album. The fervent piano-driven melody gives this one great energy, an early hit that never was. Talks about how he has nothing left to say, and it's so fitting that this is the last song on the last album he made. It's bittersweet for sure, but in the end, it's a good little treat that only big fans know about. A surprisingly good ender for Cold Spring Harbor. One of those what's next songs that is begging to be redone with better production. Feels like a lost 50s rhythm and blues tune that would have been right at home on Innocent Man 5 years later. A simple workers anthem that's fun, but it doesn't get too interesting. A pretty basic message about the ups and downs of life, delivered with absolute frenzied energy. Although overproduction is a problem on his later albums, it works quite well for the heavy, punchy energy that is supposed to be portrayed here. A bittersweet tune about leaving a place, whether physical or not, that you liked but you knew wasn't going anywhere good. The lyrics are a bit dated today as they are extremely 70s specific, but the sentiment still stands. An ode to Joel's teenage years that manages to be grounded yet hold a beaming optimism at the same time. The lyrics give a good picture of that time frame with all the product names being thrown about. A modest narrative song that recounts the life of a Russian boy growing up in the tough times of the Soviet Union. A well-portrayed anti-war message that has an air of nobleness to it that rarely is seen with Joel's songs. Manic and paranoid. The motif played by the keyboard sounds especially evil and crazed. It's all over the place with baseball metaphors and references to Sesame Street, but ultimately it's just about pressure. Joel embraces the up-and-coming new wave sound here for sure. Not bad. I mean, it's actually pretty good, but nothing really makes it stand out except the raunchy lyrics, and that's not exactly a positive. Although it screams 80s with its ultra-cheesy instrumentation, it's a prom ballad that's really hard to stomp on. I read somewhere that it was supposed to have a wintertime feel to it, and that's a good way to describe it. The lyrics are taken directly from a suicide note that Joel wrote a few years before, which is both powerful and grim. It's sort of quirky, but I'm a softie for this one. Although nothing particularly special is going on here, it would be really hard to hate Uptown Girl. Yeah, sure, whatever accent he's putting on is annoying, but it's easy to see why this one was such a hit. An upbeat one-off single about suicide prevention that you'd have to be a real Scrooge to hate. My favorite part is that he slightly messes up one of the lyrics and laughs, so they left it in because the theme here is about rolling with the mistakes. Tells the story of disillusioned steelworkers trying to make a living in the hollowed-out industrial America. The steam and train sound effects work well at adding a level of dirt and grit that makes it feel all the more authentic. The hyper staccato piano intro was so catchy that I'm pretty sure it was copied in Bon Jovi's Runaway a year later. I understand why. It has a teen angsty feel to it that makes you wonder how he came up with it in his early 30s. A Matter of Trust is a stadium rock song with its big sound that sounds better at the Coliseum than at the home. The most consistent song on the bridge, which is all it takes to be the best on an album like that. Absolutely blistering. What could lyrically be described as a hangover song. You can basically smell the husky cigarette smoke coming through the speaker. This almost hard rock piece shows Joel at his most cynical and harsh. The chorus is shouted, which just adds to the aggressive energy. It's got soul, it's got gospel, and I'm disappointed we didn't see more of this until later. Definitely the least known song on The Stranger, a good song on an album of great songs. Carefree has a live and let live attitude. Kinda sounds like a tropical resort, which ties well with that theme. It starts as a minimalistic folk song that slowly builds into a rousing choir-backed chorus. Describes the Vietnam War very well with lyrics that paint a picture of hopeless war at that time. Would be better with less cluttered sound effects though. I mean, the helicopter blades, are they really necessary? A love ballad not about love, Honesty deals with what the title suggests. Going through the motions of trying to find someone that cares enough to tell you the truth. Almost a hidden gem, but is actually quite well known. It sounds like a cross between Stand By Me and Under the Boardwalk. The lyrics are strong enough, talking about someone who's innocent picking up the pieces of another's life, but the bass line is what sticks to you on this one. A twangy guitar line leads us into one of the clearest studio productions he has ever had. Very funny material. Feels a bit like a callback to 50s rock stables, which is fitting considering the lyrics and title. It's about his mom. But instead of the expected sunny, loving tone, it's about how manipulative and selfish she could be. And as a result, sounds absolutely tortured, almost angry. The only Joel song to have the word f in it, so that's fun. By far the best of the 3 covers he did as a bonus for the Greatest Hits 3 album. You get Leonard Cohen's complex poetic lyrics paired with Joel's actual ability to sing. In the end, you get one of the strongest pieces of soul that has an absolutely killer ending that he has ever released. The last of the piano-driven ballads he ever wrote, and it carries the legacy well. A simple lullaby to his daughter. Although it's easy and cliche to call something underrated, it truly applies here as you never hear about this one. A decent rock ballad with a slight country twang that sounds better than anything he did with the genre in his early years. Designed with the Jimi Hendrix styling in mind, which is seen through the heavy use of electric guitar and complete lack of piano. A simple yet powerful love ballad that's also the first song on the first album. The most famous song from Cold Spring Harbor, and for good reason. One of the grimiest songs in the discography that is absolutely soaked in jazzy influences and riffs. Talks about a woman that's willing to ruin your life, and uses knife imagery with words like cut, carve, and slashed to portray that theme. It's elegant, it's wistful, with a classical melody, it excels in its simplicity. Joel's shortest song at just over 2 minutes. A mini epic clocking in at almost 6 minutes, by far his most ambitious song at the time. Bombastic with a wide range of instruments. It's worth remembering. A follow-up to his hit Piano Man released a year earlier that talks about the downsides to being a successful traveling musician. Joyfully cynical, and with lyrics like, if I don't get sold, I'll get put in the back in the discount rack like another can of beans. What's not to like? Starts with a film noir-esque sounding whistle line that quickly descends into this gritty staple. It's an example of a song where no aspects stand shoulder above the rest, but everything's just real good. A 6-minute epic with an orchestral backing helps make this track an absolute explosive time. Although the chorus is absolutely powerful at its climax, it's the strong, slowly climbing bridge that really stands out on this one. Although originally the B-side to Uptown Girl, it's actually a cut above the A-side it was supporting. It's got an interesting theme of useless gossip, and it's the best Innocent Man song you've never heard of. This funky little ditty is the only song on The Stranger that doesn't feel monumental, and it revels in how lighthearted it is. The energy in this one is electric, and I'm pretty sure I sang along the first time I heard it. This smooth, jazzy pop number never got the fame it deserved. Feels more mature lyrically than usual from Joel, but it's lighthearted at the same time. A sleeper hit with a synthesizer that sounds like a music box. Has a theme of contrast between a man pursuing his own dream and a friend living his parents, and it's something you don't hear every day. A jazzy tune that has an absolutely amazing harmonica echoing throughout the song. The theme is great, but he could talk about anything here and it would work because the arrangement is that good. A great little pop piece that tells the story of a guy that's trying to get a Catholic girl to do some, not Catholic things. Sure, the sentiments are childish, but if you can put that aside, it's fun. A rapid-fire piano solo begins this frantic piece that talks about a self-righteous rut that young men can often fall into. The lyrics are pointed and intelligently cynical. It's a bit on the long side, but it works without sounding like too much. A warm, fuzzy sort of thing, wrote from the perspective of his dad singing to his mom that has a Latin tinge to it. A relaxed cut on an album full of excitement that sounds like a sunny vacation. A spiraling piano line drives this love ballad that has lyrics that are more realistic and less happy-go-lucky than the norm. This makes it feel as if the song could be about an actual person. One of his most unique ventures thematically, the Downeaster Alexa is about hardships of bay fishermen in his hometown as the fish began running out. An interesting fact is that the downbeat of the song is on beats 1 and 3 instead of conventional rock songs that have it on 2 and 4. This gives it that folk song feel that ends up working really well for it. A pretty out there rocker that gives an envisioning of a bizarro world future that takes place in, you guessed it, 2017. Absolutely bursting with energy, and the quirky lyrics make it memorable. Probably the only time he named the album after by far the best song in it. It's upbeat, vibrant gospel that feels great, and the background vocals have some of the catchiest lines ever written. The final cut is a bit overdone, but by far its greatest sin is making me want more like this. A classic slow dance tune that borrows its melodic line from a Beethoven piece, but it sounds great even without knowing that. Really steps up to the next level when it goes up an octave for the final chorus. What's not to love about that? Opens with the sound of breaking glass, which signals as a way of saying that the 70s sound of Joel is out and a new fierce rock sound is in. You May Be Right is one, if not the signature rock song in his library. From the memorable guitar melody to that crazy saxophone solo, it stands as a song executed well on all fronts. This could be considered Joel's second Piano Man, as it won him the Song of the Year Grammy and made him more than just a one-hit wonder to the general public. The simple love ballads are the best, and this is the best of those. It's the biggest hit off 52nd Street, and for good reason. It's incredibly easy to listen to, has a catchy melody, and the words have a fun, curt quality to them that makes them easily repeatable. My Life may not have anything intricate going on, but it's a straightforward pop piece that sticks in your head. And that's all you're really asking for. Probably the second most popular song in his library. An ode to the troubles of the working class that sounds kind of Italian and very New York. The antithesis of his LA hating songs is this New York loving instant classic. A song about returning home that has some of the most recognizable starting chords ever. Can anything be said about this one that hasn't already been said? Nah. Sleeping with the television on reminds you why you go through all the albums and why it's worth it, because you get to discover wonderful deep cuts like this. The energy in this one's absolutely on. The instrumentation is crystal clear, and the title is unforgettable, making this probably the best Glass Houses has to offer. The quintessential hidden gem Joel song. The lyrics carry a message about mania and depression supported by the piano playing both very high and very low notes. The writing here is done with such mastery that it feels like this was years in the making. Simplicity at its finest. This has to be in the top 3 of the catchiest songs he's ever written. The best a cappella tune came out 30 years after a cappella was relevant. A nicely paced ballad about old age with a European feel to it. Opens with the lyric, "Slow down, you crazy child." Sums up the message it's trying to portray. A timeless ballad that has an almost hymn-like quality to it. Has a very raw feel to it that is Joel at his most authentic. Ironically, the album with the biggest, loudest sounds, best song is the one with only piano and vocals, which is Joel's expertise, of course. Joel's magnum opus tells the tale of friends meeting to eat and going through the stories of the old days. Its 4 movements capture the feelings of teenage aspirations, crushing loss, and rolling with the punches. Joel said while creating this song, he simply took 3 songs that were incomplete and smashed them together. And knowing that, it's much more than the sum of its parts. This one has it all.